Hello again, it's great to be with you once again. Today, what I wanted to speak to you about is celebrating God's grace. So, these moments where God really powerfully acts in our lives. It's good to remember those dates and the ways that God has spoken so powerfully to us. Some of those simple days to remember are the moments that we receive the sacraments. So, our baptism, First Communion, confirmation, marriage for priests, holy orders, just to really remember those special dates. But it's also good, to remember those special ways where God has really acted powerfully in your life, to put those on your calendar, to remember those and celebrate them, because it helps us to be thankful to God. It helps us to remember what God has done in our lives. And it gives us that courage and the strength to remember, yeah, God, you still are in my life. You are still acting within me. And that it doesn't always have to be such a powerful occasion of grace, but sometimes it's just that simple profession of faith. Many saints have said that, one act of expressing your faith in times of desolation and darkness is worth more than 1,000 praises of God in times of consolation and ease. So it's just to remember God works in so many ways, but when we know these moments, or we have these moments that deeply impact us, it's good to mark those on our calendar and celebrate them on their anniversaries, so the year that they come up. So for me, today, celebrating one of those events. So on April 18th, 2011, I wasn't yet a priest, I wasn't a seminarian. I was coming alive in my faith, coming alive in my understanding of who God is and what He has done for us. So at this time, I was an environmental technician sampling soil water vapor. And on April 18th, 2011, I was out at a familiar site to me, was the Crow Wing County landfill. So a place where they just pour garbage. Just reminds me too that God can work in any circumstance, in any situation, and that His grace is there and available to us. So on this day, it was a relatively simple day. All I had to do was go and check the water level of 36 wells. So open up each well, go down, mark the depth, record it, just so that we could see the fluctuations in the water table. So as I was doing this relatively easy task, I was listening to a Catholic CD on the Eucharist. So as I was listening, because I was coming alive in my faith, I was like, how do I explain what the Eucharist is? And I just was constantly asking myself that question, man, if someone asked me, how would I explain this to them? And then as I was kind of on the home stretch going through the last few wells, just something amazing happened, where it was all of a sudden I started to speak, to say what the Eucharist is. And as I started to speak, it was just water was pouring into my brain, into my head. And the more I spoke, the more I had that feeling, and I was just saying things about the beauty of the Eucharist. And so as I was saying these words and kind of recognizing the truth and the beauty of the Eucharist, I started to laugh because gosh, this was so beautiful, so amazing. I'd never seen it before. And there I was, a 22-year-old man, and I had never known it. And then I also began to cry because it was oh man, this beautiful thing has been around since before I was alive, and I just didn't even know it. So there I was, out at this landfill, garbage all around, and just laughing and crying and just being grateful that nobody else could see me out there as I was doing this. But that truth of the Eucharist just kept burning inside of me. Throughout the day, I was just filled with so much joy and awe and wonder at God. And I couldn't fall asleep. So as I just kind of rolled back and forth in bed, I was oh man, I'm never going to be able to fall asleep. So then it just hit me maybe I should write down some of what I remember from out there. So I began writing it out, and then I looked at it and I was like, like this is straw. Like this is nothing compared to what it was like out at the landfill. But nevertheless, I'll read what I wrote to you so that hopefully you can appreciate some of the beauty that is expressed here in this poem that I wrote. It's a little bit longer, but it's good. And I'll try to make printed copies available so I'll put a link to something below in the video. All right. So for me, like the words that really clicked and started it all was the sum and summit. But the Catechism actually says that the Eucharist is the sum and summary, the source and summit of the Catholic faith. So that's just what the words that started it in my mind. And so here is this poem that I wrote. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I ask God, who am I, a mere mortal human being, who as such will never be able to fully understand your glory? I am limited by human thought and word. Oh, how do you deem me worthy to receive such a splendid gift? Who am I to receive heaven on earth, that I should not die, but continue to walk the earth carrying your love with me? Only by your grace alone am I able to receive you. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I hold you near and dear to my heart, so that nothing may be closer. I let you know that I truly love you above all things. My heart says that I strive to see you in everyone around me, and I hold them near and dear to my heart. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I say to God, let your will be done. Take my body as a living sacrifice for you, that I may become an instrument of your will to fulfill your grand design. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I bear witness to the sacrifice that Jesus makes for all of mankind. I see him suffering in agony on the cross. I see how much pain you bear having to send your Son to redeem us from suffering eternal damnation due to original sin. I see why it is so important to obey your will and love you with all my heart, all my soul, all that I am. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I look to the Scripture and bear witness to God's plan from Adam and Eve, Abraham and Isaac, and the Israelites and all the people throughout generations before Jesus. I acknowledge how the new covenant suspends all of time and space and ties all of these into an instance through something so seemingly simple as bread. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I acknowledge the need for an authoritative church to keep and safeguard your word, so that all may be one in your love at the eternal banquet. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I bear the ultimate witness to your creative power. I see how you have crafted this miracle from the beginning of time, so that we may join you in everlasting life. I see all the many ways that you have turned something so seemingly simple into the ultimate profession of faith. Lord, when I receive you in the Eucharist, I see that you gave me the opportunity to show you that I believe in you and everything you have created and done for me amongst all worldly objects. I say to you, O Lord, my eyes may deceive me, my tongue may deceive me, my hands may deceive me, my nose may deceive me, my ears may deceive me, my mind may deceive me. But with you in my heart, Lord, you will never deceive me or lead me astray. I know that the Eucharist is all these, because you have revealed them. Oh, what a joy it is to gaze in awe and adoration of the miracle that is the Eucharist. So there's the poem that I wrote, and one of the things that still just, so many things strike me as I read it again, but just that last line, because I had no idea what Eucharistic adoration was at that time. but just like that light and that line of like, oh, what a joy it is to gaze in awe and adoration at the miracle of the Eucharist. So then, that weekend, I asked my mom, like, what is adoration, and how do I get into that adoration chapel? And so that started a whole nother chapter for me. So I hope that you find this poem moving and helpful, and I'll try to find ways of making it available to you to read, because there's just such a great depth there that you can continue to unpack and appreciate. So may God bless you, and may you always celebrate those moments of grace in your life, whether it be the sacraments or other times that God has deeply impacted and changed your life. God bless.